All right, let's look at the last substandard E. So 1E, analyze the impact of location and place on colonial settlement, comma, transportation, comma, and economic development. And then there's that semicolon. And there's that magic word include. We have include Jamestown and New York City. So in this we need to look at New York City and Jamestown. And what about them? We need to talk about their place and their location. Their place and their location, the settlement there, transportation around there, and their economic development. So what we're going to do is look at all three regions, not just Jamestown and New York City. We're going to compare and contrast their economic development, transportation, settlement, and their place. So let's look at the language of the standards we just looked at. Let's look at the element: location and place, settlement, 3, transportation, 4, economic development. We could add in here Jamestown and New York City. Alright, so we could do that. And the themes are geography. In other words, a phrase we're going to talk about geographic determinism. And then 2, migration and economics, and the culture as well. Alright, so let's look at geographic determinism. That is a theory or an idea that says that environmental and geographic conditions, in other words climate, the type of soil, and geographic conditions where a place is located, or a location is, impacts the social, political, and economic forces of a society depending on where that place and location is. So in other words, the environment and the geography of a place will have an impact on its social, political, and economic development. Alright, for instance, let's look at climate. Most of our southern and middle colonies are located in either mixed humid or hot humid conditions, which means, and if we look at New England, part of the middle colonies are in a cold climate area. What that essentially means is up here in New England and some of the middle colonies, middle Atlantic colonies, you're going to have shorter growing seasons, which means less agriculture is going to take place there as part of the economy. But if we look at mixed humid and hot humid, we're going to have longer seasons, growing seasons. So there's going to be more. Of longer growing season there. So we're going to see more agriculture develop in these areas. With agriculture, we're going to have the advent of slavery in the southern colonies because of this agriculture, and less need in slavery in the New England colonies and middle colonies. Alright, so let's look at the economy of the South, where it is, and let's look at where its location and place is. Notice that a lot of the places are going to be on the seacoast, on the border of the Atlantic Ocean. It'll be some of like Charlestown, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, and North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, Norfolk, Jamestown, Williamsburg. A lot of these places are going to be located on the coast. And in particular here we see that tobacco is going to be a large product, agriculture here in the South, and in North Carolina and South Carolina we're going to have some indigo and some rice. Also notice the Appalachian Mountains over here on the west. We see that colonization is going to hit an area here where it's going to be difficult to colonize the Appalachian Mountains and pass those because of that natural border. Alright, and in this area here we want to look at here, and some of these rivers, like there's the Potomac and the PD River and the Roanoke and the James and the Savannah. We want to look at how they are going to influence the transportation of these areas. Okay, and if we look at the New England and mid-Atlantic colonies, same thing here. If we look at the location, they're all on the Atlantic coast or the eastern seaboard area. But let's look at the agriculture or lack of agriculture going on here. So we see a lot of cattle raising, and we see a lot of fishing out here on the coast. So there's going to be a lot of that going on. Whaling and fishing and other industries. We look at grain. Some grain is being grown out here on the Delaware River area. And we see furs being traded on the inner frontier here. Notice how close the frontier is to St. Lawrence of Quebec. Iron production and whaling out here, and ships, a lot of commerce, transporting goods, and rum. Excuse me. So shipping, whaling, iron production, lumber, fishing, and other industries. In other words, New England up here is going to be very industrial, based on commerce and trade and industry. And eventually we're going to see mechanized factories up here as well. And the soil up here is going to be extremely rocky soil. The land's going to be less arable than it would be in the south. And so we're going to see a different economy. Even the politics and whether we protect agriculture or whether we protect commerce and trade. And here these people are going to protect commerce and trade and all these industries over agriculture. Whereas in southern colonies, back here, in politics, they're going to do anything they can to protect slavery, to protect agriculture. So a lot of their politics is going to be different. For instance, a tariff, which is a tax on imported goods. We're going to see a big argument occur over that, all because of the industry that is located in these areas. These people here are going to be making things in industries like iron and stuff, and they're going to want their products protected. So we can see some economic and political arguments occurring because of these two different locations. And then the New England colonies don't need slaves as much as the South is going to need slaves to get this tobacco in, and then eventually cotton is going to be the major product. So if we go back to geographic determinism, we see that even the climate and the geography and the environment is going to have a huge impact on social things like slavery. The South is going to have slaves, the North is going to have slaves, but looking at the difference, it's going to be a lot more in the agricultural South. Politics is going to be different. The New England colonies are going to like these things that protect trade and commerce. The South's going to like things that protect, slavery and agriculture. And so the economy is going to be different. And that's what we mean by geographic determinism, how climate and how the soil and how the geography affects the social and political and economic conditions. Alright, so what's New England colonies up here, and then these mid-Atlantic colonies here, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey. Where are they going to send their goods? Here's the middle colonies. If we look at that, it's a lot of cattle and iron making stuff there. It's middle ground here, some agriculture, but small farms. In the south, there's going to be huge plantations, extremely large agricultural areas. Another thing we're going to see too, there's going to be a lot of cities. A lot of cities are going to develop in New England, and some are going to develop in the mid-Atlantic states here in the middle colonies. But very few cities are going to be in the south. Okay. One of the reasons is rivers. Let's look at this. Alright, the location of a lot of these places were either in these huge harbors or bays or areas on rivers that are easily accessible to the Atlantic Ocean. Let's look at New York City. We talked about this huge harbor and this location right here, and the Hudson River going up in here, the Atlantic Ocean here. And then if we look at the Philadelphia, the Delaware Bay right here. And then we look at the Chesapeake Bay for Jamestown. And we see that all these rivers come here, and this isn't all the rivers. A lot of these are the biggest rivers. There's tributaries coming off of these rivers. That's going to be extremely important in how people travel. All these people in the interior here are going to send goods back over here to the coast, and then these places like Jamestown and New York, they're going to send goods across the Atlantic Ocean. And here's the Appalachian Mountains here. Here's a relief map. Here's Georgia down here, upper Georgia. That's where these Appalachian Mountains stop here. But they go all the way up in almost Nova Scotia. But if we look, there's a break right in here. That's the Hudson River. That's going to become very important, and that's going to empty out right here into the harbor at New York. And then later on, we're going to see a canal is going to be built right across here to the Erie, Lake Erie. And it's going to be the Erie Canal, and that's going to improve some transportation and some trade from this eastern coast over to the western side over here, where a lot of people are going to start settling around the Great Lakes. Okay, let's look at Jamestown's location. Here's Jamestown, because we need to look at place and location. Jamestown, New York City. Here's Jamestown here on the James River. Look at all these rivers. You know, the Roanoke, the James, the Rappahannock, the Potomac up here. And here's Chesapeake Bay. All these are going to empty out into the Chesapeake Bay, or some way in which they can get to the Atlantic Ocean. So a lot of transportation is going to happen on these rivers. Overland transportation was difficult at this time. You know, somebody made a joke once that a guy was going down the road with his horse and oxen and cart and got bogged down and lost his horse. You know, it was a joke, but it showed you how bad the roads were. A lot of transportation is going to happen on these rivers and their tributaries, and then all the goods from the frontier are going to be brought to the Chesapeake Bay here around Jamestown, and then taken across the Atlantic Ocean. And what we're going to talk about in Standard 3 in this triangular trade, or Standard 2, excuse me, in this triangular trade where all these colonies we're talking about, they're going to send these raw materials like sugar and cotton, tobacco, rice and indigo, anything they can get back over here to London. Remember the Navigation Acts, and to Europe eventually, because they're going to smuggle these goods too in violation of the Navigation Acts. But raw materials are going to go from the colonies over here to Europe. And it's these rivers, and it's these tributaries of these rivers and this huge bay and harbor up in New York that's going to allow transportation to occur in the colonies. Let's take a look at that using Google Images. Alright, let's look here. Here's the eastern seaboard, here's the Atlantic Ocean, and here's Europe over here. There's London. So those goods are going to go straight across here, back over here to London, and then the rest of Europe, and then they're going to send manufactured goods back. But let's take a look real quick at Jamestown first. Notice this huge bay here, and here's Virginia. And if we get a little closer, we'll see Norfolk wasn't there at the time, but there's Colonial Williamsburg, and right here in this bay, if we go up the James River here, there's Williamsburg, and see this little swamp here? That's where Jamestown is going to be settled. So there's Jamestown there. Here's Jamestown here, right here. And any goods coming in and out of Jamestown could come down the James River here, and they can transport those down and then out in here. And this is the Chesapeake Bay here, and then out the Chesapeake Bay and then across the Atlantic Ocean. That's how goods would go. And notice that how huge that bay is. Look at that. It goes way up here into Washington D.C. area today, Baltimore, into Maryland. So there's the Potomac. It's going to go up to the capital. A lot of these rivers and these bays and these harbors. There's the Delaware Bay here. This peninsula down right here is called the Delmarva Peninsula. DEL, there's the first initials, so Delaware. Maryland, you know, the first three letters, Delmar, and then Virginia, VA. Delmarva Peninsula, that is a peninsula here. Okay, so that's Jamestown, and we're looking at its place and its location here on the James River, right in here, and how it moves and transports those goods back to the bay, and then back to the Atlantic Ocean, and then back to Europe. And then the manufactured goods are going to go the other way. You know, send it back over here, go back into the bay here again, and all these other places are going to be the same way transportation wise, and then up the James River, and then right here to Jamestown again. So that's Jamestown, and that's one of the things they wanted us to do in our standards. So, but what you really need to remember is this huge Chesapeake Bay here. Let's see if we can, there it is, Chesapeake Bay. There's the name. I'll center that in for you. That's what we call it, the Chesapeake Bay. That's going to be instrumental in this place's development economically. Okay. The other place was New York, and we have it here on our map. We looked at it in our last session. Here's New York. Notice New York has a huge harbor. There it is there. And a huge bay here. Okay. And what's going to happen is goods are going to come up through here and hit New York, and then back out, and then back across the Atlantic. And this location and place is extremely important for the development of the nation, and we're going to talk about that in Standard 3. Goods going back and forth. Let's look at New York real quick again. Let me show you. If you go up New York, here's the Hudson River. There's the Hudson River going up, and let's turn back and look at this again. So here's if we get closer and closer to this thing, we're going to see rivers going across here, and I tried to show you that with this image here. And there's the Great Lakes. And New York City is going to become instrumental. I've told you before, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because of this here. If you go to New York here, we see the Hudson goes up, and then there's going to be a canal dug here all the way to the Erie. And what that's going to do is connect this eastern seaboard group of colonies and this region of the country here on the East Coast. It's going to connect it to this western region over here that's on this side. So the economy is going to be connected, and trade is going to be improved, and commerce is going to be improved because of the Hudson and the location in New York City. Alright, so there's Jamestown. There's the New York Harbor there. If you want to look at a contemporary picture of this harbor here, look at this. Check that out. And there's Ellis Island, and there's Liberty Island here. I messed up a few in our last session. I told you it was down near Staten Island. What a big embarrassment on my part. But here's Ellis Island. Here's where a lot of immigrants are going to come in. Here's this huge area here, this huge city over here, part of Manhattan. And this is this huge New York Bay. Alright, so if we look at this, which one's A, which one's B, which one's C as far as the colonies go? Let's look at the characteristics. We have trade, large farms, navigable rivers, moderate growing season. Here we have on the tidewater, the long growing seasons, plantations, a few cities. And then on this one we have shipbuilding, rocky soil, trade. We're going to find out if we identify these and we look at them. There's a short growing season, there's a long growing season, and this is a moderate growing season. We'll find out that this is the New England colonies because the short growing season, colder, shipbuilding, trade, fishing, large farms here, but not as large as the plantations. And then we're going to have navigable rivers here. And we're going to have all kind of different things. Alright, let's look at this. Alright, economic products of the colonies. New England, if we just look at a basic, raw, general understanding, New England's going to be more industrial than the South or the Middle colonies. But the Southern colonies are going to be more agricultural than the Southern colonies. Okay. Let's look at this comparison sheet here. I know this video is going to go long, but this is a very important area. We need to talk about this last one here. E. Alright, region, New England colonies. Coastal areas along the coast, good natural harbors, and then inland areas with dense forest, poor rocky soil, and short growing season. That's New England. Let's go back up here and look at this New England area. We're talking about up here around Maine. It's going to be Maine. It's part of Massachusetts now. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. This is the area we're talking about. Good coastal area here a lot of fishing and whaling products. So small farms, lumber mills, fishing, shipbuilding, trade, commerce thrive there. Cities developed along the coast, all along here like Boston, Salem, Plymouth, New Haven, Newport, all these places on the coast will be developed. All right, then people in society lived in congregations, lived on farms and cities. Merchants controlled trade. Artisans made goods. Unskilled workers and slaves provided labor. Yes, there were slaves in New England, but not as many as in the South. All right, the middle colonies had a fertile soil and a moderate growing season. Lots of rivers ran into the back country. And let's look back at the middle colonies. And what we're talking about here is right here in New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, Long Island. Let's include that. The Hudson going back into here, and then the Delaware and the Susquehanna River. A lot of these river areas pretty good there. All right, large farms, colonies, and the economy grew large amounts of rye, oats, barley, potatoes, wheats as a cash crop to sell and trade across the Atlantic back to Europe. Cities developed on the East Coast. And people in society in the mid-Atlantic colonies, wealthiest people own large farms or other businesses. Most farmers produced small surplus. Tenant farmers rented the land from large landowners or worked for wages. Okay, let's look at the southern colonies down here. Had a favorable climate, arable soil for agriculture, had wide rivers, and these wide rivers are going to make cities unnecessary. So there's not many cities going to be in the southern colonies. They grew tobacco, rice, and indigo, and they had them on large plantations. These big, huge mega farms emerged as cash crops were grown. And the people in society that were wealthy, elite, pretty much owned most of the land. Cash crops required large amounts of labor. And that labor is going to be enslaved Africans eventually for lifetime bondage. And big, huge agriculture here, lots of African slaves. Okay, that's going to sum up our geography of place and location. So we see New York City is going to be more industrial than Jamestown. Jamestown is going to be more agricultural. Southern colonies more agriculture. New England colonies more industrial.